All right, let's get right into it. I want you to picture this. You're sitting in biology class, and the teacher poses a question, a real head-scratcher that kind of messes with everything you thought you knew about life itself. Just let that sink in for a second. We're talking about something with no internal parts, no cells at all, but it somehow acts as a bridge between a rock and a rabbit. It's not quite alive, but it's not quite dead either. What on earth could possibly fit that description? You guessed it, the answer is the virus. Probably one of the most bizarre and captivating things in all of biology. So the big question is, what is this thing really? To get our heads around it, we have to pull apart the very definition of a virus. Because it's not just some tiny germ, it's a bundle of really specific and, sometimes totally contradictory traits. Okay, so let's break this down. First, viruses are acellular. That just means they don't have any cells, which are supposed to be the basic building blocks of all life, right? They're also ultramicroscopic, so ridiculously small you need an electron microscope to even see one. Now this next part is the key. They're obligate parasites. That's a fancy way of saying they have to hijack a living cell to do anything. On their own, they're just simple packages of genetic code, nucleic acid, wrapped up in a protein shell. Outside of a host cell, they're completely lifeless. But once they get inside, that's when the show begins. So let's play engineer for a minute. If we were going to build a virus from the ground up, what would we need? Let's put one together piece by piece and see what makes it such a perfect little invader. First, you start with the core. This is its blueprint, its genetic material. And it can be either DNA or RNA, but, and this is a major rule in the virus world, it's never both. Then you wrap that core in a tough protein shell, and we call that the capsid. Some viruses, like HIV or the flu, get an extra layer, an envelope, which they actually steal from the host cell they came from. And finally, some of them have these little spikes sticking out, which act like keys to unlock and invade our cells. Now that capsid shell isn't just one smooth piece. It's actually built out of a bunch of smaller protein units called capsomeres. And here's a wild little fact for you. When these capsomeres get into your nose or throat, your immune system freaks out of it. It recognizes these foreign proteins and triggers a sneeze or a cough to try and expel them. But here's the irony. That's exactly what the virus wants. It uses your own defense mechanism to launch itself to the next person. Pretty clever, right? So this all brings us right back to that first riddle. Is this thing alive, or is it just a fancy chemical? It's got a foot in both worlds, which puts it in this weird biological gray zone. This is probably the single biggest debate about viruses. And to be honest, science doesn't have a clean yes or no answer. It's complicated. So let's look at the evidence, like we're weighing both sides of an argument. So in the alive column, it's got genetic material, it makes copies of itself, and it definitely mutates and evolves over time, all things we associate with life. But in the not alive column, it has no cells, no metabolism, and get this, you can actually crystallize a virus. You can literally store it in a jar like a pinch of salt, and years later, it can still infect a cell. It really is the ultimate biological paradox. Okay, so we've talked about their strange existence. Now let's just take a moment to appreciate how incredibly diverse they are. Viruses come in all of these amazing shapes, and they use different genetic playbooks to survive and thrive. I mean, their architecture is just incredible. You've got simple rods, like the tobacco mosaic virus. You've got spheres, like dengue or corona, which is a really efficient shape. And then you have my personal favorite, the T2 bacteriophage, which looks like a tiny spaceship, like a lunar lander, because its entire purpose is to land on a bacterium and inject its DNA inside. Just wild. The lecture actually gave a really clever Bengali mnemonic to remember those rod-shaped viruses, or Dandakriti. It links the word for rod to the word for teeth, dund. It's just a great little memory hack to keep all these complex terms straight. So besides their shape, the biggest way we classify viruses is by their genetic code. You have DNA viruses, like herpes, that use stable, double-stranded DNA. And then you have RNA viruses, like the flu and corona, which use a simpler, single-stranded RNA. Remember that key rule, a virus has one or the other, but it never ever has both. And hey, to help remember some of those DNA viruses, there's another great mnemonic about Tipu's brother going to Paris. Every word is a little clue that points to a different virus, like variola or herpes. It's a fantastic little trick. Of course, just when you think you have the rules all figured out, DNA is double-stranded, RNA is single-stranded, nature just loves to throw a curveball. There are always exceptions.
And these are the cool ones, the outliers that love to show up on tests. You've got viruses like parvovirus, which somehow has single-stranded DNA. And on the flip side, you have reovirus, which carries double-stranded RNA. It's just a perfect reminder that in biology, for every rule we make, there's an organism out there somewhere that's already breaking it. So, what we've seen is that viruses are anything but static. They're constantly changing, always adapting, and that brings us to a really important idea in today's world.
And that idea is the emerging virus. This is a virus that was originally just hanging out in one type of animal, maybe bats or birds, but then it mutates just enough to be able to jump to a new species, like us. HIV, Ebola, and of course Corona are all classic and pretty terrifying examples of this. It's a process as old as life itself. But in our modern, hyper-connected world, the consequences of a single species jump can be felt across the entire planet in a matter of weeks.
And that really leaves us with one last big question. We started this whole journey with a riddle about something that lives on the edge of life itself. And as these tiny, mysterious entities keep evolving and finding new hosts, you have to wonder, what's the next great biological riddle they're going to challenge us with? And will we be ready to figure it out?